welcome back to another episode of How Did We Not Know That? My name is Jack.
And I'm Nat.
And today, Nat has a super fun topic that she has not told me about yet, but I heard it was sad.
It's a scary story, actually. It's scary.
Oh.
I have a scary bedtime story.
All right.
But, actually today I am talking about the Iranian hostage crisis. Yay!
Oh, I know that. Right before we recorded this, Nat and I were talking about the Foreign Service, and I was getting a little bit of cold feet, like, do I want to be a Foreign Service officer? Which is natural. Some of you may be able to relate. But then Nat was like,
it's a big decision.
Yeah, this topic is not going to help with your inner crisis right now.
This is definitely not going to, assure you. It's a little bit scary, but, it's a really important topic. Do you know a lot about this?
Yeah, I do.
About the Iranian hostage
crisis?
crisis?
Jimmy Carter lost his second term, and Jimmy Carter's like my maybe second favorite president, top 5.
Is he really?
Yeah, just because he was very nice. But really nice.
He was very nice, and that'll play a part in this conflict. He's a little too nice. But before we get into the episode, we have a special announcement to make.
Okay.
The How Did We Not Know That podcast has won our first ever award. You guys, this is crazy. We won an award.
I can't believe it.
We were selected as one of the highly commended podcasts of the year. So thank you to all of our listeners for your support. We couldn't have won this award.
Yeah.
Without
Not that
all
I'm
of you
sure
guys.
Nobody knew we were in this contest. Like, I forgot we were in the contest, you know. So, but thanks to you guys for listening.
Yeah. It's not a Grammy one day, but
yeah. But the good news is that, so our prize, for anyone who's curious, we won little microphones from Rode. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rode. They're a microphone company from Australia, down under. But, so hopefully our audio improves, because now we'll actually have mics. Nat and I still use iPhones and, like, crappy Amazon mics, so we're really excited.
If you can't tell, they're like, oh, yeah, we know. Thanks again for supporting us, and you guys should look forward to hopefully improved audio with our brand new microphones. That's what you get. If you guys support us, then we just keep getting better and better. But
hopefully we win more awards. If you guys know more contests, let us know. Let's submit. Let's get this going.
Feel free to nominate us for any contest you see, anything with giveaways.
We love free stuff. We really needed it. I think in the application I was like, our audio is so bad, please help. And we got selected. Literally.
Yeah, and speaking of, like, if there's things you want to give us, you can give us your money by contributing to our Patreon account. You can find us on Patreon and become a history hero with a small monthly donation. So, anyway. All right, so, I guess back to the episode. Before I get into the episode, we're going to pose a question. I'm going to ask Jack a question, and then at the end of the episode, we will find out the answer. Okay, Jack, how long do you think the Iranian hostage crisis lasted?
I know the
answer. You know the answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
But should I say? No, let's save it, though. I know it, though, so we'll go.
Okay.
It was a while.
It was a while. Okay, so Jack already knows it. But for those of you listening, if you don't know it, you can make your guess and
don't Google
check
it.
At the
Just
end.
listen
Don't
to
Google
this
it.
episode.
Okay, so to understand the Iranian hostage crisis, we have to understand the history of Iranian-U.S. relationships. And pretty much, brief summary is that tensions have always been high between Iran and the U.S. for a very long time, mostly due to conflicts over oil. So pretty much as soon as Iran discovered that they have petroleum reserves, the British and the U.S. came in and they started controlling the majority of their petroleum reserves. So Iran didn't really have control or authority or like financial ownership over these reserves. So Britain and the U.S. were profiting over this. However, in 1951, the newly elected Prime Minister of Iran, his name is Mohammad Mossadegh. He's a European educated nationalist, and he announces that he wants to nationalize the country's oil industry. So he's like, actually, it's going to be owned by Iran. So America, the UK, like, you guys can leave.
Well, that makes sense. That's a good idea.
Yeah. He's like, actually, like, this is our land, so we're going to profit off of it.
Yeah.
But surprise, surprise, America and Britain were not happy about that. So the American CIA and the British intelligence services responded by grouping together and devising a secret plan to overthrow Mossadegh and replace him with another leader who would be more cooperative with Western powers. So through this coup, Mossadegh is deposed, and then a new government is installed in August of 1953.
When you say
so
deposed,
again, just
is that they didn't kill him?
He's
did
like,
he?
no, he didn't kill him. He's just like they kind of supported, like the creation of a coup and like just general like public dissent, government dissent. They're like, hey, everybody, we shouldn't like this guy.
Oh,
it's like okay, I guess now we don't. But yeah, he was not like assassinated.
Okay.
So then the new leader that's put into power, his name is Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, and he was part of the Iranian royal family. And so this new government is secular, it's anti-communist, and pro-Western. And for those who are secular, just a reminder, it means that there's like separation between like church and state, like religion and state. So he's anti-communist, communist, pro-Western. So obviously that means that's like good news for Western countries. And so the new prime minister and the U.S. come to an agreement. Basically, the U.S. gives Iran tens of millions of dollars in foreign aid, and then the new Shah gives the U.S. 80% of Iran's oil reserves to America and Britain, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, like, at first they were like, oh no, we're not going to have control over Iran's oil. But then they're like, we have a solution. Like, let's just find someone who will agree to give us control.
Yeah, a majority. That's a lot. That's not even...
80%. Yeah. So they only own 20% of that.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. And oil, that's a lucrative business. They're making lots of money.
Yeah.
So because of this, many Iranians begin to resent the U.S. and their intervention in Iranian affairs. So to make matters worse, well, not, maybe I shouldn't say that, but on top of this, the Shah, which, by the way, Shah is like kind of another word for like king. He's kind of equivalent to a king. But yeah, so the Iranian Shah that the U.S. government supported, like this new guy who's doing this new oil deal, he turned out to be a super brutal dictator, and his secret police tortured and murdered thousands of Iranians. So, like, not only did he get into this oil deal that people, like, weren't agreeing with, then he turns out to be incredibly violent, and it's a really brutal government.
Yeah. The government that we helped instate, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just furthermore, like, to add insult to injury, the Iranian government is spending billions of dollars on American-made weapons while back at home the Iranian economy is suffering.
Whoa.
So if you're like a regular Iranian civilian, you're definitely not going to have positive views of America. You're like, first of all, they're like taking all the money out of Iran from these oil deals.
Yeah.
And then also this government who is super violent towards me, like, is spending all of the money that could be going back towards his people. They're spending it on weapons that are coming from America. So America is profiting off of that too.
Right.
You know?
Oh, this is terrible.
Yeah. Wow. So obviously people are incredibly angry, and specifically they're angry at America.
Oh, okay.
So by the 1970s, all of this takes place in the 1970s, many Iranians are fed up with this new Shah's government. And then they turn to the radical revolutionary Islamist movement led by an anti-American cleric. His name is Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. And so he's like the figure, he's the leader of this anti-American revolutionary movement. And then in July 1979, these revolutionaries forced the Shah out of power, and they forced him to flee to Egypt. So he's out of the picture. Mm-hmm. So the pro-American guy is out of the picture. He flees to Egypt. And then the Ayatollah Khomeini, he's the one that was the head of the revolution. He installs a militant Islamist government in its place. And so the former Shah, he's obviously an ally to the U.S., but back then, like, at first when this happened, we really didn't defend the Shah, mainly because we just didn't want to cause any trouble in the region. We were like, sorry, I know you're an ally, but, like, we don't want to start anything. Mm-hmm. However, the Shah later developed severe advanced stage cancer.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm remembering this.
Yeah. And so in October 1979, President Jimmy Carter allows the exiled Shah to come to the U.S. so we can treat his cancer. So again, so all of this happens during the Carter administration, and kind of like we were saying earlier, President Jimmy Carter was very much a humanitarian leader. He had very strong morals. He was like a really nice guy.
Yeah, that's what everyone describes him as in history. He's a bit too nice to be president. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, maybe sometimes his strong morals kind of outweighed, clouded his political decision-making.
Yeah.
Because, again, there probably wasn't, strategically, maybe it was a bit of a risky move to let him come in the U.S. Mm-hmm. But again, you just got to think, this man, he was a former U.S. ally, and he's seeking medical care. So anyway, regardless of what you think about it, he ends up in the country, and he's being treated for his cancer. Mm-hmm. And because of this, anti-American sentiment in Iran exploded. Iranians were just fed up. They were just so done with America. And student revolutionaries were looking for a dramatic way to, declare a break from Iran's past. They're, past. Again, it's, the 1970s. You have to, remember, that's when, all these coups are happening. It's all these changes in government, all these fights for independence. Everything's changing in this, within a decade, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's the time for change. So they're okay, this is our time to change. They want to declare an end to America's influence in Iranian affairs. And they also want to raise the profile of the revolution's leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. They want him to be, internationally recognized, you know? Mm-hmm. And so, on November 4th, 1979, just as the Shah arrived in the U.S., a group of Iranian students smashed the gates and scaled the walls of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 98 people, including 66 Americans, hostage. And basically, the students are demanding the return of the exiled Shah. They want the U.S. to give him back to Iran so they can punish him accordingly. Mm-hmm. But obviously, the U.S. doesn't agree to this. So most of the hostages that were taken were diplomats and embassy employees. After a short period of time, 13 hostages were released, I think it was like within a week, approximately. These hostages were mostly women and African Americans and citizens of other countries, other than the U.S. I guess like Khomeini, when this happened, Khomeini was like, oh, like it's okay if we let them go because they're already subject to the oppression of American society. So like, yeah.
Oh,
so he's like,
ouch.
yeah. So, and then even later, a 14th hostage was sent home due to medical issues. He needed to seek better medical care, so they let him go. Because you have to remember, like, it's such a tricky... It's like Jenga. Like, so when all these revolutionaries and all these protesters are storming the embassy officials cannot shoot them, because if they shoot an Iranian citizen, like, that's going to lead to war.
Oh, yeah.
And same thing the other way. So, like, if they kill any of these hostages, that's going to lead to war. So it's like... Yeah, so it's like a very difficult... Oh, it's like a very scary balance. So another story is that on the day of the attack on the embassy, 6 American diplomats hid in the home of Canadian diplomat John Sheardown. And then, so they're hiding in the ambassador's house. But then it's like, how do you leave the country, you know? Like, you can't just go to the airport and you're like, hi, I'm an American. Like, they're rounding up all the Americans, you know? And so, Canadian Prime Minister Joe Clark issued passports to the 6 Americans so they could evade capture. But it's like so much more complicated. This is literally the plot of the movie Argo. Have you seen Argo?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I watched it for research for this. It's literally about just how they got these 6 Americans out of the country. Because, like, okay, then it's like even if you give them Canadian passports, they're going to be in, like, you have to go through customs at the airport. So they're going to be like, what were you doing here? You have to have a credible reason as to, like, why you were here. And then also you have to, like, lie. Like, they're going to ask you about, like, your whole background. So you have to, like, be, like, undercover, like, and have this whole
story,
I guess, going. Story about, like, oh, you're this Canadian, you know? And so it's a great movie. Argo was such a good movie. I definitely recommend it. I think it won, like, it was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I don't know if it won, but it was really good. And it had a lot of historical facts, and it really put everything into perspective. But yeah. Anyway.
Okay, I'll check it out. I feel like
it was really good.
You recommend things to watch, or a movie every single episode. You recommend a new movie.
Yeah, it's fun to watch, like, movies based on historical events. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounds like more exciting rather than just, like, reading the articles, like, that we have to do for research.
Right.
You know?
I used to do the same thing when I was taking a Shakespearean course. I just watched the plays because reading it is so not exciting.
Yeah.
I don't even understand what they're
saying.
saying.
And again, it's hard to get the emotions. Like, you know, like when you're reading Shakespeare, like, it's easier to understand what the emotion is when you see it. And, like, same thing, like, Argo, like, when I first read about this story about the escape, like, I didn't really think of how stressful that was and, like, how intense and how complicated. And then I saw the movie, I'm like, oh my God, like, how did this happen, you know? So, like, it was just a couple sentences in an article, but now, yeah, anyway. Puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, anyway, by midsummer of 1980, 52 hostages remained in the embassy compound, and diplomatic maneuvers and economic sanctions had no effect on the crisis. It was really hard to find people on the Iranian side to have, like, meaningful negotiations with, you know, because it is, like, this revolutionary rebel government. So it's like, how do you communicate with them? Like, how do you, like, sit down and, like, come to a resolution? So the hostages themselves, they were never seriously injured, like, with bodily harm. However, they were subject to just really demeaning and horrifying treatments. So, for example, they were blindfolded and then they were paraded around Tehran in front of TV cameras and screaming crowds. They weren't allowed to speak or read. They just had to sit in silence, like, all day, every day. Mm-hmm. And they were rarely allowed to change their clothes. And throughout the crisis, like, you have to realize, like, there was all this, like, really horrifying uncertainty about their fate. Like, they didn't know if they would be tortured, if they were going to be murdered, or if they would be set free. It was just every day you're, like, you don't know what's going on. And so, obviously, the effort to bring the hostages home as soon as possible became one of President Carter's top priorities. But he had tried the diplomatic route. He tried the diplomacy route. He tried, like, economic sanctions. That wasn't working. Mm-hmm. And so, finally, in April 1980, President Carter is just super frustrated with how slow everything is moving. And he kind of goes against the advice of all of his, like, advisors. And he decides to launch a risky military rescue mission known as Operation Eagle Claw. So this operation was supposed to send an elite rescue team into the embassy compound and, like, grab all the American hostages and then bring them home.
That's so hard. How does it even work?
It's really hard. I don't even know how that works, and, like, I don't know how you go about doing that without, like, how do you sneak them out? Like, you know, because obviously they're heavily guarded, and as soon as, like, they sense anything, like, they're all gonna be killed, you know, so
exactly.
So, like, it just seems super risky, but, I mean, also, it's, like, I can't imagine being in that situation, like, if it's all on you, and you're like, I've tried, like, every other way, you know?
Yeah, I remember I watched a documentary on this. I don't know why. It was like a late night YouTube sesh. But a lot of people asked President Jimmy Carter, why he didn't just bomb the place, I guess, and you know, show America's strength in our military presence. But the reason why he didn't want to do that was because he knew that that would result in all of the American hostages dying.
They're all gonna be killed.
More innocent people in Iran dying, and also a following war that would probably emerge. So
they would go to war.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. If it's a hostage crisis, like, obviously, like, they're being held as, like, a threat. Like, if you do anything to hurt us, like, these hostages are going to get killed. So it's, like, it's a really, I don't know how you solve that. Like, I can't imagine how stressful that must have been. Right. And, like, the whole country is, like, counting down every day, you know? And, like, of course, it's because you're like, what the heck? Like, this is just a horrifying...
Was their only condition that they wanted the Shah to be sent back?
No, their conditions were, like, you need to... It was like, you need to send over, like, all of the Shah's wealth, like, however much money he has, needs to be sent back to Iran. You need to submit, like, a formal apology. You need to, like, give up control over your oil reserves.
Ooh.
And then, so it was, like, pretty high demands.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like and then again, you know, America's policy is that we don't give in to terrorist threats, you know?
Yeah. That's
another thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like, that was, like, that's everything, is you don't give in to terrorist threats.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it's also, like, this isn't, like, your only thing you have to focus on. Like, you're also, like, running a country.
Yeah.
There's other wars breaking out elsewhere, and it's just... Yikes, I never would want to be president.
Yeah.
I guess in conclusion. So Operation Eagle Claw was supposed to rescue the hostages from the embassy compound. However, a severe sandstorm on the day of the mission caused several helicopters to malfunction, including one helicopter that veered into a large transport plane during takeoff. And 8 American servicemen were killed in this accident.
Oh, no.
And so Operation Eagle Claw was aborted.
Before they even got there.
So not only were the hostages not rescued, but then we also lost 8 lives.
Yeah,
just in this attempt.
Wow.
But, like, the bodies... They had to leave the bodies in Iran.
Uh-huh.
And so then, like, the Iranian military, like, got hold of their bodies, and they, like, paraded their, like, dead bodies around.
Oh, my gosh.
It's, like, awful. So it's, like, and then that's being broadcasted, too. So it's, like, not only did these men die, but then this is what happened to them after, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just, like, a really awful... Like, this is such a huge defeat. And so President Carter's Secretary of State at the time was Cyrus Vance. And he, like, before Operation Eagle Claw, he was like, don't do it. Like, I don't support this. Mm-hmm. And then this happened. It was a failure. So he resigned in protest. And it was, like, the first Secretary of State to, like, publicly, like, resign and, like, publicly say that it was because of his disagreements with the president in, like, a long time, since, like, the 1800s or something.
So what did
like, it's not a very common thing.
Yeah, what did the Secretary of State want to do? Did they just want to...
He didn't want to, like, he wasn't looking for, like, a confrontational military approach. Okay. He wanted to stick to diplomacy, economic sanctions. But then President Carter was like, well, we have to, like, wrap this up.
Yeah,
we have to get these hostages home.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah, it's like, how can you predict that? Like, yeah, it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, by May 1980, the U.S. convinced its closest allies to institute an economic embargo against Iran. But this didn't affect negotiations. Like, still, again, economic sanctions weren't working. And then, July 27th, the former Shah that, like, this all started, the one who he went to the U.S. for cancer treatment, he dies. And then that, like, really doesn't change anything either until the U.S. is like, what the heck? So it really wasn't until mid-August of 1980 when Iran finally officially installed a new government. So then, like, negotiations seem a little bit more hopeful because it's like, finally we have, like, actual people to talk to. And then, additionally, on September 22nd, Iraq invaded Iran, and this would lead to the Iran-Iraq War. And so now Iran is at war with Iraq, so they need money to fight this war. But they have all these economic sanctions on them. So the embargo affects Iran's military capabilities. So that's like, they're like, okay, maybe we do need to start negotiations. And then furthermore, when the new prime minister visited the UN in October of 1980, like many of the other world leaders he met with there made it very clear that they're not going to support Iran in this war as long as they have American hostages. So it's like, okay. That war really changed things. So as a result, Iran began to pursue negotiations with the U.S., although they refused to negotiate directly. So Algerian diplomats acted as a middleman for the negotiations, which this is, like, something that always really interests me. This happens, like, quite a lot with, like, negotiations or, like, treaty signings. Like, it'll always happen through, like, a third, not always, but oftentimes it happens through, like, a third party. So, like, in this case, it was, like, Algeria as the middleman. But I'm always so curious, like, how do you choose who is the middleman? And like, why would this country agree to this? And so I'm like, wow, it just seems even more complicated because it's like you have to negotiate with Algeria to get them to negotiate with Iran, you know?
It does add another layer. And how do you choose a non-biased third party?
Yeah, that's, I'm like, wow, that's, like, such a tricky process, and you, like, really have to be careful. But yeah, I always think that part of
your negotiation skills will get lost in translation. I don't know if you're familiar with Chris Voss. Yeah, from our master class.
Yeah. I watched the master class.
Right. No, well, Chris Voss is so good at negotiation, hostage negotiation particularly. But if you have to use a third party, you can't use the tactics Chris Voss is using. It's just if the third party wants to use it.
Yeah, a lot of his tactics were based on, like, the language you use. But imagine negotiating in a different language, then that all is thrown out the window, you know?
Right.
Like, translation issues.
Totally true.
But, okay, so Iran really wanted that embargo lifted, so an agreement was made between the U.S. and Iran finally. Okay. So on January 21st, 1981, 444 days after the crisis began. So that's the answer to our question, how long did the Iranian hostage crisis last? It lasted 444 days, which is such a long time.
That's
I
over
cannot
a
imagine.
year. Yeah.
Like, just to be in such horrifying, awful living conditions, I don't know. I can't imagine the impact that has on you and how you survive that. I can't imagine. Like, oh my God, just not being able to speak.
Yeah.
Not being able to read.
Just everything. It's your time. Like, time is so valuable. Time is really valuable to me, as you probably know from our friendship. But, yeah, so just taking, like, someone's time away, you can't get any of that back. It was a whole year of your life that could have been spent, you know, with loved ones, making new memories, and you just have a whole, like, gap in your life, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so amazing. Like, it's really incredible that they were able to survive it and, like, they escape alive, you know?
Yeah.
But, wow,
I'm sure a lot of them got
that's
PTSD.
such a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You have to deal with, like, the lasting medical effects.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, so it was 444 days, and they were released literally hours after President Ronald Reagan's inaugural address. So it was like they were waiting, like, as soon as President Carter left office. Like, they were not going to let it come to an end during his presidency.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So obviously the hostage crisis had a huge effect on America, on Iran, on the world. So first of all, like, this is really important to start off with. Like, this important note is that the hostage crisis led to a lot of hate towards Iranians living in America and, like, people from the Middle East living in America in general, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It just led towards a lot of hate against those groups of people. So, and I don't know why you just blinked out. And then additionally, the hostage crisis made the Carter administration look weak and ineffective. The Soviet Union took advantage of this moment of weakness in order to win strategic advantages for itself. And so in 1979, while the hostage crisis is going on, the Soviet-supported Marxist rebels made, like, strong victories in Ethiopia, Angola, and Mozambique. And then also the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan during this in order to support the Marxist government there. But yeah, so, like, this had a impact, like, this affected the whole rest of the world, you know? Mm-hmm. Because the U.S. was so caught up in this. And many historians believe that this crisis was the reason President Carter didn't win a second term, because obviously all of this is going on during the 1980 election, and that clearly does not help his campaign. But yeah.
I'm pretty sure Jimmy Carter, ex-president, I'll just call him Jimmy Carter. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Jimmy Carter thinks that this is the reason he lost.
Yeah, for sure.
It probably was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not, like, it's not the only reason.
Certainly didn't help. Yeah.
Yeah, because President Reagan won in, like, a landslide. It was not close, So, yeah, I guess that is the Iranian hostage crisis.
Wow.
It's scary.
Super scary.
Because, yeah.
Well, what frustrates me is that the very first president, you said he was before, you know, the Shah got instated with the U.S., help with the U.S. and the British governments. The very first president was European educated. So I completely agree with what that president was trying to do, which is build Iran up and keep their natural resources within the country so that they can profit off of that and then use that wealth to grow the country. Yeah. And so if he's European educated, he took those capitalistic tactics from Europe and America, which is what we use, but when it affects our ability to gain wealth and our ability to have access to those resources, then we stamp you down for the same lessons that we follow.
Yeah.
So that's what's really frustrating.
Yeah, no, that is really frustrating. And, like, yeah, that's the thing is, like, to me, it's completely understandable why, like, I understand their frustration behind the fact that the U.S. is profiting off of their oil reserves and they're interfering in their politics and their government. Like, that is very frustrating.
Yeah. Because
does not mean that...
That's the reason why a lot of countries that we see, especially in some African countries today, especially, a lot of them, their natural resources still to this day get exported by European countries and America. So that's why a lot of those countries are very slow with their economic growth.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, if all these, like, injustices are being committed against groups of people like this, obviously, like, people are not going to be okay with this. Like, they're not going to just let it go by and be, like, peaceful and happy, you know? Like, people's frustration, they're going to, like, get even frustrated. They're going to become frustrated and get, like, more and more upset until, like, they reach a certain point when they're not making rational decisions, you know? Like, you just reach a breaking point when everything explodes, like, it's not just one person, it's like a whole group of society, like a whole society, and like things can escalate so quickly in a mob mentality setting like that, you know? So
that split, man, could we have avoided it had we not split it so unevenly? That's what really bothers me. That would anger anyone.
Yeah, maybe that should be the moral of the lesson is maybe we don't need to like steal things from other people.
Yeah, maybe
we should stop stealing things.
Because that's how it all started, you know?
But yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nat, for covering this episode. This was covering this topic, sorry. This is such a good topic. It's a huge event in U.S. history, so if you had never heard of it, now you know. Also, how much of this affects U.S.-Iranian relations today?
I mean, they're not great today.
I know. We still have a tense relationship with them.
Like, that's the thing is, like, yeah, the hostages were released, but it's not like, oh, now we're friends.
Yeah.
We're definitely, the relations are still very tense, so there hasn't been a resolution.
But anyways, all right. But
anyway, sad and scary.
Yeah,
scary dream.
It's important to know how events in the past affect our relations today with other countries. So I'm glad that you covered this, and now we have a better idea as to why we have a strained relationship with Iran today. Okay, well. Yep, thank you, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, everyone.